So I guess we're starting. Okay. Hello. Apparently I'm moderating this, which I kind of forgot, but whatever. I welcome to the Discovering Discovery panel, or the Discovering panel. I don't know, something like that, where we will be talking about all things Star Trek Discovery. And we will start by having the panelists introduce themselves. Kelli, tell the nice people who you are.
Hello, folks. I'm Kelli Fitzpatrick. I am a writer of science fiction and fantasy, a winner of the Star Trek Strange New Worlds contest, and I currently am a contributor to the Star Trek Adventures RPG line.
And Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Fan. I'm also a writer, mostly of sci-fi and fantasy for young adults. My books include Stronger Than a Bronze Dragon, the Starship series, the Jane Colt series, and I've blogged once in a while for StarTrek.com.
And I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido. I've written quite a bit of Star Trek fiction over the years, as well as a whole lot of Star Trek nonfiction. I've been rewatching various Star Trek shows for Tor.com, currently in the midst of a rewatch of Star Trek Voyager. Plus, I've been reviewing, also for Tor.com, the new episodes of all the various new Trek shows that have been coming out, not just Discovery, but also Short Treks, Picard, and Lower Decks. And when they happen, Prodigy and Strange New Worlds. So, I've actually been a Star Trek fan since birth. I grew up watching the original series and in reruns with my parents, because my parents are also nerds. I am a second generation nerd, and have continued to enjoy the shows. So, let's just start with just a general question. Are you guys enjoying? What are you enjoying about Discovery, and what are you not enjoying about Discovery? So what do you think of Star Trek Discovery? He says, being incredibly vague. Mary, you go first.
Star Trek Discovery. It's a really interesting show in that I feel like it's almost a different show every season. It really feels different. Like the first one was about this Klingon war. The second season was more about this mystery, this cosmic mystery of the red burst. And the third one takes us to a part of the Star Trek timeline that we haven't seen on screen at all before, really, which I was actually really excited about at the end of season 2, because I really like the cast of Star Trek Discovery, and I like sort of some of the explorations it did, but it always bothered me that the farthest future in the Star Trek timeline we'd gone before that was probably Voyager, because ever since then, everything had been a prequel, and originally Discovery was a prequel as well. And I was like, this is kind of cool, but A, it's a little weird, especially when you're kind of familiar with the old continuity. And B, it's well, we're sort of stuck in the century. And so I thought it was really cool. At the end of season 2, they were like, we're going to blast you so far in the future. We can really do whatever we want, which I was really excited about. I know, Keith, you're familiar with Andromeda. I don't know how many others out there are familiar with Andromeda, but it was a show that was on around 2000 to 2005, something like that.
Thereabouts,
based on Gene Roddenberry's notes. Yeah, about the fall of a great civilization that was basically the Federation. And I really liked that show. And season 3 started giving me Andromeda vibes, where it's the Federation has kind of fallen. And, we have this one ship of idealistic Starfleet people from the past that, kind of wants to put it back together. And so I thought that was really cool. It was not something we'd really seen in Star Trek before.
Kelli, what about you?
I really love this show. There's much more that I like about it than not. I agree with Mary that every season has felt like kind of its own show, and I've kind of enjoyed that there's really sort of an arc to the whole season. We've seen a lot of changeover in the cast, but some really strong characters that have been developed, and I think every season we see a few more sort of come to the surface. I really enjoyed seeing Dr. Culber kind of come more to the forefront in this past season. I really liked his role that he played, and I love the visuals and the cinematography. It's just my friends that I watch this with, we're always just this looks like top budget movie, which I know their budget is close to that, but it's beautiful to watch. It's inspiring. Even when it kind of goes to dark places, I feel like it's still really sort of lifting, and I feel uplifted when I watch it. I also really appreciate that it lets its characters unpack the stuff that they go through. So if there is trauma, they give the characters space to sort of process that in a way that I think is good, at least most of the time. And of course, there are kick-ass women all over the place just doing amazing things. So I'm always for that.
Yes. Yeah, I like Mary, I was not entirely thrilled that they were once again going into the prequel business. I think honestly that was a direction that the franchise started taking in 2001 with Enterprise, and everything they've done since then had been a prequel of some sort, whether it's the Bad Robot movies or Discovery or Enterprise. And I think Star Trek has always been at its best when it moves forward. Which is why I was very grateful that basically in 2020 we got 3 new seasons of Star Trek, and all of them were actually pushing the timeline forward to one degree or another. Lower Decks took place right after Nemesis. Picard took place 20 years after that, and then of course 32nd century now. And that I'm so much happier with that. My biggest issue with the first 2 seasons was that it was retreading old ground that didn't, it was looking backward, and Star Trek is at its best when it looks forward.
Yeah.
And while I personally don't give much of a crap about the fact that the technology looks more advanced than it did in the original series, because we are not Thermians watching historical documents. But in fact, we are watching television interpretations. In 1964, that's what we thought. The cage is what we thought the future was going to look like. In 2017, Discovery is probably what we think the future is going to look like. By the time we actually hit the 2400s, we'll be completely wrong anyway. And they're going to look back on this and think, wow, they were idiots. But that didn't bother me so much. But I don't know. There was no point in opening that can of worms in the first place. It would have been much better off to just move forward. And they finally did that in season 3. Having said that, one of the best aspects of the show, I think, and which certainly a lot of the viewership tends to agree on, especially since they're getting their own spinoff now, is bringing in Anson Mount and Ethan Peck and Rebecca Romijn as Christopher Pike, Spock, and Number One. What was your take on those additions to season 2, and what are you looking forward to in the Strange New World series, which is slightly off topic, but Kelly?
I loved seeing Captain Pike as a very non-toxic male figure who was leading with authority and compassion and grace, and it was just so refreshing to watch that and not have to see the macho-ness being thrown around constantly to prove that he's in charge. But such a capable leader, and I think he really kind of put his own spin on the character. We've seen a lot of different iterations of Spock in a lot of different media, and I feel like Ethan Peck captured that essence in his own way, in a way that I enjoyed watching. And so I loved seeing them come on the show. I thought season 2 was really strong overall as a package. So I'm excited to see them go off and do the Strange New Worlds thing, and maybe have a more episodic, different feel to it than Discovery. They can kind of have it both ways. I am mourning the loss of those uniforms, though. I loved those uniforms from the Enterprise. Bring those back, please.
Mary?
I really liked it when they came onto the show. And seeing Captain Pike kind of at his peak was really interesting, since all we'd ever seen of him before was kind of, we only had a brief glimpse of him in the original show, so it was cool to just explore that character. And also after the mess of season 1, not that the show itself was messy, but just Discovery was messy. It was kind of nice to see Discovery under good leadership again, because Discovery hadn't really had that, and it felt a little more Star Trek-y that way too, because like we've said, Star Trek has always been about idealism and good leaders and such, and we didn't really get a lot of that in season 1. So it was nice to see some of that old school idealism back in season 2 through these characters that we kind of knew but didn't really know, and so it's they're familiar, but there's plenty of room for exploration.
I especially, one of the things I'm most looking forward to with Strange New Worlds is the exploration of Number One as a character, because we know what happens to Pike. We know in graphic, gory detail what happens to Spock. We have absolutely no idea what happens to number one. She's a blank slate. The only previous appearance of her was in the cage, and there's a lot to work with there. And I thought Ramin's casting was perfect, and she absolutely has nailed the characterization there. And that's I'm very much looking forward to that. And which leads me nicely to the next thing. And Kelli, you touched on this. One of the things that has always been one of Star Trek's hallmarks has been a level of inclusivity. In 1966, it was incredibly radical to have a woman of color, an Asian guy, and a Russian guy all working with the white people, and nobody nobody commenting on it. That it wasn't like, not only were they there, but the fact that they were there was just matter of fact, which in '66 was huge. One of the hallmarks of all the secret hideout shows has been an even better level of diversity, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit, or even a lot of it. And Kelli, you starting with you, because you mentioned it specifically, is that one of the part of the appeal is that we've got a woman of color as the lead character, and a much more diverse cast than even Star Trek has ever done before.
Absolutely, and there's a couple of reasons here. Like, one of them is what you said, that it's not always the issue. Like, what we want in a diverse, inclusive society is that everyone can just exist and participate on all levels of society without it having to be about the issue of the need for equality, because we just want to be included. And so I feel like Discovery nails that. And we see very diverse people in all of these awesome roles doing their thing and being awesome people, which is the ultimate goal. There's a time and a place to focus on issues, but it shouldn't always be, about that. I just rewatched the first episode of Stargate, I think SG-1, which is a fun show, but like the opening show, or the opening episode, is all about this. There's a woman in charge in the room, and we have to have a whole scene about how it's a big deal. And like, Disco just kind of doesn't do that, and that's awesome. The other thing is, for the viewers, and this is something I've kind of been researching recently, there's kind of like a burden of, when you're watching something that is not inclusive, or that has maybe some toxic ideals and ideologies woven into it, it disrupts the viewing experience for folks who are either in those groups or who are sensitive to the fact that that's there. And so it's nice to be able to just watch and enjoy and not be kicked out of the narrative by, oh, look, sexism again. So that hasn't happened, at least for me personally, when I'm watching Discovery, and that is such an awesome thing. I want us to keep doing that.
Mary, you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I mean, Kelli basically said it all. It's just nice to be able to watch a show and not think about it, like not make it an issues thing. And I agree. And it's also great to finally have a Black woman in charge of, a sci-fi show like this. I do remember when the first episode of Discovery was aired, we all thought it was going to be about Burnham and Giorgio taking on the universe. And so we were like, what? When Giorgio just bit it in like episode 2 or whatever. And I do remember like a lot of us, especially women of color, were kind of salty about that. It's like, we thought we were going to be watching a show about 2 women of color, but look, another white guy. And I am glad that they brought Giorgio back, in another form, and made her a major part of the show. So, it's not like she just showed up just to die. But yeah, I feel like they've done a great job. Are they perfect? No, because they're never going to be, but they're trying, and they're doing as good a job as they can, I think.
And I like the fact that they're making not only the effort to be inclusive, not just in the casting, but also in little things like the nomenclature, like the names. Star Trek historically has been very North American in its naming of its ships and things. And we're finally seeing them moving away from that, not just in Discovery, but also in Picard. And
I noticed that. I was quite shaken when there was a USS Shinjo. I was like,
right, yeah,
I know their tongue.
Yeah. And the ship, and I can't remember the name now, but the ship that Riker was commanding at the end of Picard season 1. and just all over the place. I am a cishet white guy, and I'm sick of cishet white guys. Okay, we've had our moment in the sun. There are other people. Thank you, Alex, the Jean King. I'm well represented as a cishet white guy. I'd like to see more Italians, but that's my own personal thing. I'm still waiting for a romantic male Italian lead, but that's a whole other problem. The casualness of the diversity and the inclusivity is just it's refreshing to see. Star Trek, at its heart, has always proposed a future where Earth is united. And Earth has a lot of different people on it, and it's really nice to see that.
Yeah, I feel like with Discovery, it's gone somewhere like the previous shows haven't gone in terms of, I guess, sort of gender identity and orientation. Because we had people of color before, but we hadn't had like an openly gay officer, and now in the latest season, we have 2 trans folks in the show who are it's not a big deal. They're just there. It's not like when like Adira came out as non-binary, it wasn't like, oh my god, what's that? It's like, okay, you're they them. That's it. No big deal.
Yeah. Which is
so refreshing.
Yeah. And one thing I find interesting about the show, changing tracks a little bit, and we've touched on this a bit. Each season, yes, has had a different feel, and part of that is because each season, and it's going to be true again with the next season based on how season 3 ended, has a different person in the captain's chair. Season 1 it was Lorca, season 2 it was Pike, season 3 was Saru, and now, spoiler alert, season 4 is going to be Burnham. And I think it's fascinating looking at how the tone of the ship was different depending on who was in charge. Under Lorca, it was not a nice place, really.
Yeah, no, for real.
And of course, it turns out that it wasn't really Lorca; it was Lorca's evil twin Skippy. So, and then once Saru took over from Lorca initially, then compassion became the order of the day again. And then under Pike, it was a more relaxed ship, and a more hopeful ship under Saru. And I think it's been fascinating because the captain has always been, in every other Star Trek show, the captain has been the main character, and it isn't here. How do you guys think that has been working, where the main character isn't the person in charge?
I gotta admit, like, as much as I love the idea of Michael as captain, a part of me was a little bit disappointed, mostly because I feel like with Michael not being the captain, there was kind of a lot more she could do, like just going rogue and exploring the universe and not having to worry about the fate of the entire ship. Like, she could just kind of do her own thing. And that was interesting because it's not really something we've seen on a Star Trek show, like, I guess until like Picard, because, the main character was always the captain. It was always about the command crew. They always had this big ship behind them. Whereas Michael could kind of just go off and do her own thing. And I thought that was really interesting. That said, it was definitely a very powerful image to, have a Black woman in braids on like the command deck and taking over. I also really liked Saru's arc, how he kind of went from this kind of timid by the books officer to like having to take charge himself. And I was a little disappointed with where his storyline ended. Mostly because it felt like he was finally starting to get his footing as captain, and then suddenly he just decides to abandon it all for this bratty child.
Yeah, I was disappointed with what they did with Saru, just because I agree. I kind of saw him going all the way. He was going to be admiral. He was going to be heading the fleet someday because he had done all of that work and that character growth, and he kind of had earned it. So I know, it's very sweet to see him with the child, but yeah, it was sad to not see him there. I would totally watch a season of Michael Burnham and Book off being vigilantes, which maybe we're going to get some of that in season 4. But like, I was so mad when they were like, skip, we're not going to show you that. I was like, no, I want to see that. But I kind of felt like they were almost sort of branching off and making Michael more into that sort of vigilante character who maybe doesn't fit neatly into the Starfleet box anymore. So I was kind of surprised that they circled back around to give her or to have her earn that chair. So I'm interested to see how it works out with her being captain, and maybe we'll get to go back and see that year that they skipped.
For what it's worth, there is a Discovery novel coming out by Una McCormick that I can't remember the title of off the top of my head. That's going to chronicle basically Burnham and Book's year.
Oh, excellent!
Between the first two episodes.
Well, that's good.
So that I think that's coming out at some point. And I agree on Saru. I would have much rather. I mean, I can understand him at least taking a leave of absence to work with the 100-year-old kid. But I loved the way that whole thing played out in and of itself in season 3. Yeah. And Bill Nunn was amazing as the kid. But yeah, it felt like it was cutting off his development at the knees. And honestly, and this leads to the next question I wanted to ask, which is, who's your favorite character on the show? My favorite is Saru, because Saru is like the perfect Star Trek character in so many ways. He's inquisitive, he's compassionate, he's scientifically minded, he is always struggling to do the right thing, and isn't always sure how to do it right. One of the things I really enjoyed, which went all the way from season 1 to season 3, was he takes a very methodical, scientific methody approach to being a captain. You know, the first time Lorca put him in charge, he was looking at what other captains would do. And then again, when they moved to the future, he was trying different things, like that disaster of a dinner party, and then later doing movie night, trying to find something that would actually work. So that's why I love Saru. I think Saru, and also Doug Jones, is just amazing. So then I turn to you. Who are your favorite panels? Who are your favorite characters? I can use words, really. And Mary, you first.
I don't think I can pick one, because I
That's
like
fair.
many of them. Yeah, I love Saru. Like you said, he's a very by the book kind of guy, but he also tries new things. And I also did love watching him stumble around the captaincy. I think that's another reason why I was so disappointed that, it just kind of ended. I was like, I would have liked another season of him dealing with that before he moved on. But alas, this is where we are. I love Tilly, of course. I love her arc, how she, starts out kind of uncertain, but at the same time, she's not insecure, if you know what I mean. It's like she sometimes is like, okay, maybe I don't know everything, but at the same time, when she shows up, she shows up. I love Burnham. Of course, she's the main character and she's kick-ass. And I really love Mirror Giorgio, because she's just such a badass. Oh my goodness.
So I love Jet Reno. I love engineers, period. I tend to like engineer characters, but she is so hilarious, and I just love her humor, and I would watch, like I said, a spinoff just with her. I love Saru for the reasons that you stated. I also really love Dr. Culber's character. He's been through a lot, and yet, in this last season, I feel like he really kind of became a voice advocating for mental health, which isn't always at the forefront of Star Trek stories. They go through all these crazy things, and then okay, next thing, and there's all this unpacking and processing. Sometimes we get to see that, but I feel like he was maybe kind of putting a light on that, and having been through all the things that he has been through, that was very powerful for me to watch. Him do that. I also just want to see more of the secondary bridge crew and the B team. I want to see more of Awoshkun and Detmer, making crazy eyes at each other because they can't believe what's going on. I want more of their backstories, because they seem like really cool people. We just haven't got to unpack who they are yet, as much as I would love to see them, get whole episodes dedicated to just them.
Yes, I agree. The hints we've gotten about both Owasakan and Detmer in particular have been very captivating, and yes, I would like to know more. Detmer said she's been piloting since she was 12. How the hell did that happen?
And Awoshkin has an amazing backstory with her family that she's hinted at in
Right.
the past, and I'm like, I want to know this. Give us some flashbacks here.
Yeah. My wife has been standing next to me at this part of it because she's heating up some food, and she wanted me to mention her 3 favorite characters were also Jet Reno for the same reasons you said, Kelly, and Culber just because he's awesome, and also Tilly. Now, I have to share an experience that happened. Um, in the episode in which Tilly was made acting first officer, after Burnham was demoted. And by the way, I love the fact that finally, for like the first time in Star Trek history, somebody like stole a ship and went off and did something against orders and actually suffered consequences for it. It only lasted 3 episodes, but it's something. Because people in Star Trek never suffer consequences for things. I'm still waiting for Spock to be, taken out behind the woodshed for all the stuff he pulled. But when Tilly was made acting first officer, my wife, who is generally a calm and even-tempered person, was bouncing up and down in her chair because she was so happy to see somebody who is not a typical Hollywood, incredibly skinny, perfect-looking person. Somebody who is chubby, somebody who is smart, somebody who has difficulty, who is socially awkward, being rewarded.
Yeah.
And that partly plays to what you were talking about, Kelly, about how the Discovery is more acutely aware of the mental health problems that can come of dealing with all the crap that Star Trek characters have to deal with all the time. Geordi gets brainwashed into being an assassin and we never hear about it ever again.
Right?
Picard gets turned into a Borg and it's mentioned in like 3 other episodes. Yeah. Picard was tortured and it never comes up again. That's the sort of thing that's going to have an impact. And while it's unfortunate that they went and killed Culber in season 1 and the producers justifiably caught a lot of hell for it, they were able to, by reversing it the way they did, and in a manner that was no more ridiculous than the way Spock was resurrected in the 3rd movie, it has given them an opportunity to really work with that. And yes, Culber is the ship's counselor that Deanna Troi should have been and wasn't often enough.
Wasn't given the opportunity to be often enough.
Yeah. They only occasionally got that character right, and it's unfortunate because the you need somebody like that on a show like this. All right, now for the more, who's your least favorite character?
Stukal, the man-child.
Who?
The man-child at the end of season 3.
Bill Nunn's character, the 100-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know, I feel like the actor did a great job. I just didn't like how that storyline concluded. It was kind of a letdown because, you had this burn that was such a big deal all season. And I wanted it to either be actually just a natural disaster, nobody could have controlled it, just act of God type thing, because I thought that would have been interesting, because there have been moments in history where civilizations were reshaped by things that nobody could control. So I want either be that very unintentional or something that was very intentional, like the introduction of some creepy new villain that somehow managed to do this. And instead it was oh, it was an accident because a guy lost his mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not impressed.
Kelly?
I did not like, I can't even remember his name because I didn't like him that much. It's the guy who turns into Control.
The Section 31 dude. Yeah, I don't remember his name either.
Yeah, see? Okay. I feel like he was one-dimensional, and I knew immediately who he was and what was, that he was going to be a bad guy. And I don't know. I just didn't. He was too stereotypical for me to like him. Then there was really nothing likable about him personally. So I don't know. I feel like they could have done something a little more creative there.
I'm going to tempt Mary's wrath right now. My least favorite character is Mira Georgiou.
Oh, dare you?
Mainly because not so much the character herself, but there are 2 reasons why I dislike the character. One, I would much rather have had the mainline Georgiou. I wanted, like you, Mary, I wanted the show where Georgiou and Burnham are out on the Shenzhou kicking ass, and we were denied that show. But
Mira Georgiou is so interesting. She's
But my problem was I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with her going forward on the forthcoming Section 31 show where I'll be curious to see what they do there with her in the lead. I didn't like the role she started taking on in Discovery.
How dare
itself.
you?
It just didn't. It didn't. This is a woman who ran a totalitarian empire, and they're treating her like their weird aunt. And I'm sorry. I didn't buy that transition. I didn't buy that they were being that frankly nice to her. This is a mass murderer, for crying out loud. I liked watching her anyway because it's Michelle Yeoh and I'd watch her read the freaking phone book. And I love the fact that they continually contrived excuses to have her get into fight scenes because it's Michelle Yeoh and that's what you do with her. And she's good at it. The potential is there for an interesting character, but I was just frustrated by the character we should have gotten, which was the mainline one. And yeah, or both. Yeah. And I'm curious, I'll be more, I suspect I will be more predisposed toward a Giorgio who is changing, as was indicated in the Terra Firma two-parter, and seeing how she develops from there. I just didn't like the way she was used on the show. I would have rather she just stayed behind and not come to the future, but that's a whole other problem. I also will agree that, and somebody in the chat, Leland was the guy you.
Oh, thank you.
I can remember, and yeah, he was pretty nowhere. But I also wasn't all that thrilled with Lorca, but
yeah, he was not very compelling as either a hero or a villain.
Yeah. The what's interesting to me, and something I came out of the first season. The first season felt like it was written to be binged. Like the way, like, because and then they aired it like over the course of several months on a weekly basis, and people were constantly saying, well, that was predictable, I saw that coming, and that wouldn't have been so bad if they had released it all at once. And the second season and the third season were actually written like a weekly adventure, which I think worked better.
I know people have very different thoughts about the first season, but I actually really liked Ash Tyler's character and what they allowed to happen there, because they allowed a guy, a male character, to experience some pretty traumatic stuff, and let him unpack it on the screen. And it's really emotional scenes, and I thought there was some really awesome connections. I feel like they've done a really good job with the relationships in the show. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but having the development of the different, sort of interpersonal relationships have been handled really well.
Yes.
Throughout the show.
The one of the things I actually liked about the way Ash Tyler developed, that actually led to one of my favorite Saru moments, which was when Saru basically tried to get Laurel to help him. And her first thought was, well, this is war. That's what happens. And then he actually shows her how much he's suffering.
Yeah.
And just throws that line right back at her, saying, this is war. This guy who is neither Vok nor Ash and is suffering. And the captioning just did that as Wagner Ash, and that okay. Sorry, I had to comment on that. The captioning has actually been really excellent for the most part, but every once in a while. Obviously there will be a season 4. In fact, I believe they started production on it already. What do you look forward to seeing in this season with the crew now wearing the same gray pajamas that everybody else is wearing in the 32nd century, and Burnham in charge and all the rest of it? Kelli?
I was actually really interested in the political dynamic. So I loved seeing the negotiations between Vance and Osira, and I was hoping that was gonna go somewhere and we'd get some DS9 really crunchy socio-political stuff going on, and then that kind of fell apart. So I don't know if we're gonna get any more of that, but I feel like they've set up a world in which that kind of conflict and storytelling could really take root and thrive. So I want to see more of that. You have all of these groups and powers that are in this world. I want to see them, do some more clashing. They've spent a couple of seasons fighting physical wars and fighting sort of, I'm going to call it a force of nature. I know it's control, but this thing that we have to defeat. And now I want to see them learn to get along in the area that they're in.
Mary, what about you?
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like, we're in this future where there isn't one or two dominant forces. It's kind of more scattered, and that, has a lot of potential to be really interesting just to see all these different forces at work. Like, you can't just say, hey, I'm the Federation, I'm the big guy around here, you have to listen to me. And people are like, nah, we don't have to listen to you anymore. There's also some characters I want them to explore more, mainly the two new ones, Adira and Gray. I feel like they set up some really interesting stuff there, especially with, Adira not being physically Trill and yet having a Trill symbiote, and like what that means and what's going on with Gray. Like, apparently he's actually able to manifest. He's not just a memory. So I'll be curious to see what they do with that. And I want to see more Grudge. She is a queen.
Yes. Definitely must be more Grudge, always.
I was surprised that we didn't find out any more about the cat in season 3, but I'm sure that's coming. It's one of those running secrets.
One of the things, Kelli, what you were talking about is one of the things I'm looking forward to is more political stuff. And yes, as the guy who wrote a novel about the Federation president, yes, I want to see more political stuff. In fact, I was disappointed. There was a mention of a Federation president, but it was Vance who was doing the negotiating, which I think was mainly just because they'd already gone to the trouble of hiring Oded Fair, so you want to use him. But and I agree with you, Kelli. That scene was phenomenal. That was
awesome.
One of the best examples of a scene of two people negotiating that Star Trek has ever done. And I wish it could have gone somewhere more interesting than where it actually wound up. But I would love to see what the political structure of this version of the Federation is, and what the process is for reintegrating people. They're bringing, Trill and Nivar are both rejoining. We saw that at the end of season 3. What's that process like? And really, I want to see more of Nivar, because one of my favorite episodes was Unification 3, and first of all, I love the ridiculousness of doing the third part of a 2-part episode from 1991. And just the fact, it is the most Star Trek thing ever that it took, several centuries, but Spock's goal of reuniting the Romulans and the Vulcans actually happened. And I loved seeing that, and I loved the dynamics that we got just among the people that we saw, the arguing and how tenuous the reunification really is. And I want to see more of that. That's a fascinating, to coin a phrase, look at a species that has been an important part of Star Trek since the beginning, and how they're developing. And and just in general, that all that stuff, plus seeing how, what Burnham's discovery is like as opposed to Saru's discovery and Pike's discovery and Lorca's discovery. So, this is a little harder question to answer, because it's so serialized, but is there any single episode of Discovery that has stood out to you as one you liked? Or a set of episodes?
Over the whole series?
Throughout the whole series, yeah.
Episode 2 of season 2, which I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one where they Pike and Awosh-kun and Burnham go down to Elysium, and they find the little conclave that was rescued and dropped there. And I love that for several reasons. We get some really great characterization on both Burnham and Pike and Awosh-kun, and in a fleeting moment. But it's also one of the great themes, I think, in Star Trek is that it embraces mystery, and we know stuff, but we also don't know stuff, and there's a lot of unknown out there. And I thought they did a really good job of balancing between the dialogue between Pike and Burnham about science and beliefs and stuff. It's really fascinating, and I think it's a really good example of the intellectualism of Star Trek and the philosophical, humanistic thread that runs through stories and makes us really think about who we are and why we believe the things we believe about the universe.
Mary, what about you?
It's hard to say because it is so serialized, but I think maybe the first episode of season 3, just because of how much they opened up in that one episode, how they kind of rebuilt the Star Trek world from like the ground up in this like part of the timeline that we'd never been to before, and just showed us new things and did it in a really fun way as well. It wasn't just, okay, let's just land here and walk around. Like they had things going on. Book was a great new character. You know, Burnham's like confusion was kind of a stand-in for our own confusion. And I just love like the doors it opened.
I have a hard time narrowing it down. I'm going to cheat and actually give 3 answers. One from each season, conveniently. In the first season, I loved, it was the first season, Letha, which is the one where we find out that, and what I loved about it, it wasn't so much the episode itself, but what it accomplished, because it did something that good prequels can do, which is expand on the universe in an unexpected way. In Letha, we found out that Sarek was specifically told that only one of his children could go to Vulcan Space School, you know, whatever. And so the spot he reserved was for Spock. And of course, we know that Spock rejected that and joined Starfleet instead. And when we first found out about that back in 1967 in Journey to Babel, it looked like Sarek was being incredibly petty and was kind of a jerk. Now, Sarek is incredibly petty and kind of a jerk, but having that revelation there suddenly added so much more texture to that argument and it more depth to the relationship between Sarek and Spock, because now it's something that, like, if you've never seen the original series, it doesn't have an impact on your enjoyment of the episode itself. They did a good job of that, where it was just, you know, something that Sarek had to do, choosing between his Vulcan kid and his adopted human kid. But that was just such a nice, brilliantly written little bit that expanded the texture of the universe in a really nice way. I loved If Memory Serves, just because that was when Pike got the flash forward as to what was going to happen, and it makes Pike a much more interesting character, in that he knows that he's doomed, in a sense. And I particularly like the way they played it, because the one thing it's obvious that the disfigured version of Pike that we saw in the framing sequence of the menagerie, the way it was played there was that he is in constant pain, which puts a lot more gravitas to the tragedy. The other one is, for the reasons I already explained, is Unification 3, just because it was such a wonderful, just a wonderful Star Trek-y thing. And I especially loved when Burnham is watching the footage of Spock from the original Unification, the look of sheer sisterly pride on her face. Like, that's my brother. Look at what he did. which was great.
That's really nice, because it's easy to forget sometimes that Burnham and Spock are related, at least in this season, because, you don't really talk about it much. So that was really nice to see.
We got one question in the Q&A thing. Do you think Michael will have conflicts with Starfleet Command as to how they go about getting the UFP back together again?
Oh, yeah.
I think we'll be lucky if she doesn't have, if she can get a moment where she doesn't have conflicts. That was one issue I had with season 3, is I felt like she disobeyed every single order that they gave, which is fine, but then now she's in control of the most powerful ship. As long as they're okay with that, as long as they know what they're signing up for, but I hope they know what they're signing up for.
The speech Vance gave her indicates that he does.
Yeah, that's true.
That he recognizes that she doesn't think the way everybody else does, but as long as, and I think honestly his feeling is, better to have that be under his command than off on her own.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mary? How do you think that's going to play out?
I think they're definitely going to have some conflicts. I think Michael's going to want to go rogue because that's what she does. That's who she is. And they're going to have to sometimes rein her in. And I actually hope they have an episode where she disobeys and she's wrong, because so been Michael does whatever she wants, but in the end she's always right. And that's kind of why there's no real consequences. I would love an episode where they tell her do A, she's like, no, I'm going to do B. It turns out she's wrong and she actually has to face some consequences.
which would be a new thing for Star Trek just generally. Unfortunately, that's. Well, I've been rewatching, the shows for Tor.com and watching the new ones, and it's just it's really been brought into sharp relief. That no matter what the characters do, they don't, there's no actual consequences for it. And by the way, I'm going to disagree with what was just said in the chat. We have not gone full circle because if you actually watch the original series again, Kirk was not rebellious. Kirk followed orders all the frickin' time. It wasn't until Star Trek 3 that he disobeyed orders, and that was specifically to save Spock. And then all of a sudden, Kirk's the Maverick who goes his own way all the time. That is a myth that I'm always trying to bust. But are there any other questions from the audience or any other comments? Or not. Please feel free to put it in the little Q&A section down the bottom there. So, because we still have about 10 minutes or so. What other things that we haven't touched on? We haven't really talked much about, actually one thing that just occurred to me, family. The importance of family, both biological and chosen, is very important in the show. How do you feel the way they've been handling that, Mary?
I think they've handled it really well, and one of Star's strong points has always been that they always treat the crew as a family. These aren't just working professionals who happen to share an office that's a spaceship. Like, they actually genuinely care about each other, which makes it way more compelling to watch. So that when one person's in trouble and everyone kind of rallies behind them, you understand, like, you want to be there for them as well.
Yeah, I agreed. My first Star Trek that I watched was Voyager, and I feel like out of all of them, they kind of have to become, a family. But Janeway makes it a point of pride that she's going to keep the family together. So it feels very natural to then watch that happen on the Discovery, and I feel like it's especially since they're doing such a good job of making these characters inclusive, not just with the representation of the actors, but like to see. Culber and Stamets kind of adopt Adira was like one of the coolest moments, and like they're a family within a larger family, and it was just like so awesome to see that happen. So I think it's awesome, and I think I'm hoping that will continue. I think Saru had a major hand in making it feel that way, so I'm hoping that Burnham will continue that in her own way.
It was Stamets and Culber adopting Adira that prompted the notion to ask that question in the first place, honestly. Okay, we got a few more questions. What do you think is in store for Adira and Gray, and do you think they'll explore more about how Adira hosts a Trill? Yeah, they kind of have to.
I really hope so. It's something we really haven't seen before, so. And I do want to know what they're going to do with Gray, because that whole like hologram reveal where it turns out he can manifest. I'm like, oh, so is he going to be kind of like the Doctor? He's going to be like a holographic character. Like, is that going to cause any strain in their relationship? Because they're a romantic pair that won't be able to touch.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Kelli.
I loved that moment when Gray manifests like that, because the holograms like subroutine or algorithm was keyed to recognize discrete beings that had personhood, and it recognized Gray. So like I think just having that as a statement that's been made on screen makes for a really neat dialogue surrounding that joining. And with all the technology in that era, I don't see why they can't. They had Voyager was able to come up with a mobile emitter. Like, I feel like they should be able to do something, 900 years in the future for Gray, if they want to. They may not want to.
I think it'd be interesting if Adira and Gray were to at least temporarily break up, because they're like physically joined and like they can't escape each other. Like, I just think that would be a fun moment to explore. It's like, go away, I can't, I'm inside your stomach.
Yeah, and they already established on DS9 that the previous hosts can have their own discrete personalities. We saw it with the Giantara in Facets, and then we saw it again in Field of Fire when Esri called up Duran specifically. So there was already precedent for that. And Kelly's right. With the technology that should be available to them, there should be a way to make Gray a bit more substantial. There was something somebody said in the chat that I'm forgetting now. About whether Saru will be back. What do you think Saru? I mean, Doug Jones is coming back for the next season, as far as I know, and as far as everybody has said. So, what do you think Saru's role will be? Because what?
I could potentially see him taking on more of like a diplomatic advocate role, because he does have that sort of like compassionate heart and sensibility. So I could see him sort of, as if they are successful in reintegrating these different worlds and cultures to be more connected, I could see him maybe facilitating that. I don't know. He might be good at that. He's also good on the bridge of a starship. So, I wouldn't be mad about seeing him back there either.
Mary?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I do think now that they have gotten him to leave Discovery, it would be a little bit of a cheap thing for them to just bring him back immediately. So it's like, if he's going to leave Discovery, at least do something with that. And it would be interesting to see a character who's a diplomat, who has a big role in this, but who isn't the one running around on a spaceship, shooting bad guys.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I thought it should be too. So I'm just going to say what they said. One other person was asking, we've only got a few minutes left, who you think Burnham's first officer is going to be?
Tilly.
It should be Tilly. Okay, let me rephrase that. It should be Tilly, because they balance each other out, and Tilly has already proven herself in the chair.
Except she didn't entirely prove herself in the chair. Tilly is a perfect XO as for the day-to-day of the ship, because she is absolutely the heart and soul of that ship, and she knows what makes it tick, and she is the perfect person to basically carry out the captain's instructions, which is one of the jobs of a first officer. The problem is I don't think she's ready to be sitting in the big chair yet. Osira played her like a $2 banjo. No, I not just that. It's because she's an ensign still. She doesn't have the experience. And I think it would be a good opportunity here, because there really should be somebody on Discovery who's actually from that century serving on the ship, because these people are still 900 years out of date. And I think it would be good for there to be somebody in a position of authority on the ship who actually knows the era better. Yes, Burnham's been there for a year at least, but I think that would be an interesting notion. And then and Tilly would make Tilly the second officer, basically, which was Data's position on the Enterprise and sort of Sulu's position on the original series, is somebody who still is still doing the administrative aspects of being first officer, because like I said, Tilly really is the soul of that ship, and the soul of that crew in so many ways. But so I think she should still be in a position of authority, absolutely, for that reason. But well, yeah. But and having said that, if they made it Tilly, I'd be perfectly okay with it also, because it makes because if for no other reason than it makes for good story possibilities, because she and Burnham do balance each other out, and they do make
nobody can like challenge Burnham like Tilly can. So
yes.
that if we're worried about Burnham going off the deep end, then it might be a good idea to keep Tilly nearby.
That is true. Tilly will call Burnham on her nonsense. So, and I think we are running out of time. So very quickly, tell the nice people where they can find you online after this panel is over, because they've heard how awesome you were for the last hour and want to know more. Mary?
The easiest way to find me online is through my website, maryfan.com. It has info about all my books. It has links to all my social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Likewise, you can find me at my website, kellyfitzpatrick.com, and my Twitter handle is @kellyfitzwrites.
And I'm online at DeCandido.net, which is a hilariously primitive website, which I'm supposed to be upgrading at some point. The pandemic kind of slowed everything down. But that has links to all my social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, my stuff for Tor.com, my YouTube channel, where I read my short fiction and other cool stuff. So Kelly, Mary, thank you so much. You guys were amazing. And They are filming season 4 right now, so hopefully before the year is out, we'll get season 4 on CBS All Access. Audience, thank you all 20 odd number of you who came. You're wonderful people. And please go onto the Discord channel if you can. I don't know if you guys are going to be on the Discord channel to talk. I won't be. I've got other things I have to get done. But if you could go to the dealers room, there's a bunch of dealers who are suffering greatly because they can't be in person. And if you could go and patronize them, please, and throw some money at them, that would be a good thing. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Keith. Okay. It's too...